In the 7th year of her secret relationship with her best friend's brother, news of his impending marriage spread like wildfire, and the bride wasn't her. When Amelia Somerset rushed to the private room where Jackson Wells was dining, she paused at the door as she heard one of his friends speaking. "Jackson, you've finally gotten what you wanted. Your dream girl is back, and your families are arranging your marriage. This must be the happiest day of your life. You should dump that substitute girlfriend of yours now. You're such a beast using your sister's best friend as a replacement all this time." Her body froze as though someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over her. Through the door, she couldn't see his expression, but she could hear the casual indifference in his voice. "Give me some time. The poor girl is too in love with me. She'd probably cry herself to death if I told her the truth outright. I'll break it to her gently." They had been together secretly for 7 years. He had doted on her completely. With one exception, he refused to make their relationship public. At first, he had laughed and said, "Amy, just wait a bit. If Veronica found out I'd stolen her best friend, she'd kill me." Later, after she graduated college and became his secretary, he said, "Amy, just wait a little longer. Office romances are always complicated. I don't want you to face all that gossip." She had believed every excuse, silently playing the role of his secret girlfriend for all those years. But now, she heard the real reason he never wanted to go public. He had never loved her at all. She was nothing but a substitute. Hearing movement inside as people prepared to leave, she stumbled away in panic. Amelia ran all the way back to the mansion and went directly to Jackson's secret room, a place he had never allowed her to enter, no matter how much she had begged or expressed curiosity. Now, she flung the door open. On the desk sat dozens of photo albums. She picked one up and flipped through it, discovering they were all filled with pictures of the same woman. The woman looked about 70% similar to herself, but it wasn't her. This must be his true love, Miranda Coleman, the heiress who was now set to marry him. In the drawer, she found a thick stack of plane tickets, hundreds of them. Looking at the dates, she realized that during their 7 years together, Jackson had been flying abroad almost weekly. It wasn't hard to guess who he was visiting. The room he had forbidden her to enter was filled with his love for another woman. Amelia's eyes reddened with tears. After a long moment, she let out a self-mocking laugh. She laughed at her own foolishness and naivety. 7 years of love had been nothing but a charade from the very beginning. Just then, her phone rang. It was her father calling. "Amy, have you thought about the arranged marriage? You've been living in that city since college and haven't come back. I know you have a boyfriend there, but has he ever come to meet me in all these years? The match I've found for you is 1 in a million." He continued his usual persuasive chatter, but this time, before he could finish, Amelia interrupted him with a choked voice. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'll come home for the arranged marriage." Her sudden agreement caught Alexander Somerset off guard. After a moment, he reacted, "Are you serious?" "Yes. When I return this time, I'll stay in North City permanently. I won't leave again." Delighted, her father said "good" several times before hanging up after a few more words of instruction. Amelia carefully returned everything she had disturbed to its original place and quietly left the room. She had just reached the living room when the door suddenly opened, revealing the face she had loved for 7 years. Jackson noticed her reddened eyes and quickly handed her a jewelry box, his voice soft as he tried to comfort her. "I knew you'd cry when you heard about the engagement. The engagement is fake. It's just for the sake of business cooperation between our families. We'll have to put on a show for a while, but I won't marry Miranda." Looking into his gentle eyes, she didn't hear a word he said. She already knew the truth, and now she recognized his words for the lies they were. She casually placed the gift on a nearby table and nodded calmly. "I understand." Whether his engagement was real or not didn't matter. Her own arranged marriage was definitely happening. Jackson had prepared himself for a lengthy session of consoling her, but her calm reaction caught him off guard. Feeling somewhat anxious, he asked, "Amy, aren't you upset?" "You said it's fake, so why would I be upset?" Hearing this, he relaxed and instinctively pulled her into his arms. His hand caressed her waist, fingers slipping under her top until she grabbed his hand. He froze, but before he could question her, she had already pulled away from his embrace. "I'm not feeling well today. Let's not. Is it your period?" Jackson didn't press further and instead massaged her abdomen before holding her as they slept through the night. The next morning, when Amelia woke up, she was alone in bed. Unconcerned, she got ready and took a taxi to the office. Upon arrival, she went straight to HR to collect a resignation form, which she then slipped among other documents requiring signatures before heading to the CEO's office. What she saw when she opened the door stopped her in her tracks. Jackson Wells, who is always so dignified in front of others, was crouched on the floor, gently massaging a woman's foot. He removed her high heels and replaced them with a pair of flat shoes. "Those heels must be tiring you. You don't need to be perfectly put together around me, I just want you to be comfortable." Hearing movement, they both turned to see Amelia standing frozen in the doorway. Jackson's expression flickered momentarily before quickly returning to normal. Before he could speak, Miranda frowned and said, "Jackson, your secretary is so rude. How can she enter without knocking?" Amelia opened her mouth to explain, but the words caught in her throat. What could she say? That this was a privilege Jackson had once given her. Now that he had a fiancé, how could she mention such a thing? She turned to look at Jackson, who averted his gaze and merely cleared his throat before speaking in a businesslike tone. "What do you need?" "Mr. Wells, there are some documents that need your signature." After a moment of silence, Amelia handed him all the documents. He began reviewing and signing them, flipping through the pages. When he reached the last page, she bit her lip anxiously. It was her resignation letter. Just as she was anxiously waiting to see if he would sign it, a sudden cry rang out. Looking toward the source, she saw that Miranda's water glass had tipped over, spilling hot water onto her hand. The scalding liquid left her eyes red with pain, looking utterly pitiful. Jackson immediately panicked, and without bothering to check the final document, hastily signed it and carried Miranda out of the office. Watching their retreating figures disappear through the door, Amelia felt a complex mix of emotions. She didn't know whether to feel heartbroken that Jackson cared so much about Miranda that the slightest injury to her made him lose all reason, signing documents without even reading them, or whether to feel fortunate that Miranda's timely injury had prompted Jackson to sign her resignation letter without hesitation. After collecting all the signed documents, Amelia took her resignation form back to HR. "Since Mr. Wells has approved, you can leave after completing the 1-month notice period." Amelia nodded and headed back to the secretarial office, where she noticed her phone buzzing with notifications. They were messages from colleagues who had accompanied Jackson to the hospital. "The CEO is so devoted to Miss Coleman, it was just a minor burn, yet he reserved an entire floor of the hospital for her. I know, right? And when Miss Coleman mentioned wanting certain foods, he immediately sent people to get them, no matter how far they had to go." Did you see how the CEO looked at Miss Coleman? I've never seen him look at anyone with such tender eyes. The Wells Group is finally getting a new mistress. Reading these messages, Amelia couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Jackson truly loved Miranda. Not only did he fly abroad monthly to see her when she was pursuing her dreams overseas, but he also needed Amelia as a substitute to ease his longing. Now that Miranda had returned, he had immediately arranged their engagement, giving her the public recognition that Amelia had waited 7 years for, but never received. A sour feeling spread from the depths of her heart. She closed her phone, not wanting to see any more. Back at her desk, after working for a while, it was time for lunch break. Just as she was about to go downstairs to eat, her father called, perfectly timing his call. "Amy, since you've agreed to the arranged marriage, when are you planning to come back? I need to arrange the wedding." "In a month. My resignation procedures will be completed by then." Thinking of the resignation letter she had just submitted, she answered truthfully. Hearing her father say good before hanging up, she noticed that other colleagues still in the office had gathered around, discussing with undisguised surprise. "Amy, you're resigning? Why?" After a pause, she didn't conceal anything. "I'm going home to get married." "So suddenly? With whom? We never heard you had a boyfriend." "Your hometown is in North City, right? Once you leave, we don't know when we'll see you again. Let's have a get-together after work as a farewell." Hearing her colleagues chattering, Amelia smiled and didn't refuse. After dinner with her colleagues that evening, Amelia was about to hail a taxi when a Maybach suddenly stopped in front of her. The window rolled down, revealing Jackson's face. "Get in." His words were brief and commanding, but instead of obediently getting into the car as he expected, she began walking along the road, as if she hadn't seen him, and tried to hail another taxi. Jackson's expression darkened as he drove alongside her, causing most taxi drivers to deliberately avoid her. After the third taxi passed her by, Amelia finally gave up and got into his car, meeting his somewhat exasperated face. "Amy, I've already explained to you that Miranda and I are just putting on an act. Why are you angry again?" "I'm not angry." Amelia stared straight ahead, her response tone completely calm, but he refused to believe her. "If you're not angry, why wouldn't you get in the car earlier?" After a moment, a somewhat sarcastic smile tugged at her lips. "Didn't you say our relationship needed to be kept secret? My colleagues were nearby. How could we maintain secrecy if they saw us together?" Despite her barbed comment, Jackson didn't get angry. Instead, his face showed more amusement. He pinched her cheek. "You say you're not angry, but you clearly care a lot. I promise there's nothing between Miranda and me, it's just an act. I won't actually marry her. Stop being upset with me. Once this is all over, I'll tell everyone that you're the one I truly love, okay?" He had expected tears of gratitude, but instead she just stared at him directly before finally asking, "Really?" Her gaze made him uncomfortable, and he unconsciously looked away without answering. Amelia wasn't surprised. Even if he had answered, they both knew it would have been just another lie to appease her. Jackson's claim that he wouldn't marry Miranda was false, and his promise to go public with Amelia was equally untrue. But since she had already decided to leave, she wasn't as heartbroken as she might have been. The next day, Amelia received a message from Jackson at work asking her to go to a bridal shop. As his secretary, she couldn't refuse, so she took a taxi there. At the entrance, she immediately spotted Jackson's familiar Maybach. She walked straight toward it. The window was open, revealing two people kissing inside. Hearing her approach, Miranda pushed him away with a blushing face. "Stop it, someone's coming." When she looked up and saw it was Amelia, Jackson's expression stiffened. Miranda had used his phone to summon a secretary for today's bridal fitting, but she hadn't expected it would be Amelia. He bent down to speak softly to Miranda. "Let's get someone else. She's young and clumsy, she won't take good care of you." Miranda gave Amelia a meaningful smile. "I think she's perfect. You told me to use your phone to call a secretary, and I thought anyone would do. What's wrong? Is she special?" In the end, Jackson couldn't refuse Miranda, or perhaps it was simply that he never denied her requests. Even when she deliberately humiliated Amelia throughout the bridal fitting, he just sat and watched, never intervening. Like when Miranda forced her to kneel for half an hour while trying on wedding shoes. Or when she made Amelia run all over the city buying food, from the south side to the north, from the east to the west. Or when she made her hold up each wedding dress she wanted to try, forcing her to keep her arms up until they trembled with exhaustion. Watching Amelia's miserable state, Jackson's expression became somewhat strained. Miranda caught his expression and put on an act of pouting concern. "Jackson, do you think I'm being too harsh on her?" Only then did he hide his expression, looking at Miranda with nothing but tenderness in his eyes. "Not at all. What are secretaries for if not to be used?" After comforting Miranda a bit longer, Jackson's phone suddenly rang. He gestured at the phone, indicating he needed to take the call, before walking away. As soon as he was out of earshot, Miranda's gaze found Amelia through the full-length mirror in the bridal shop. A mocking smile played on her lips. "When I first saw you yesterday, I wondered why you looked so much like me. Now I understand you're my substitute. But I advise you to give up whatever hopes you might have, since Jackson and I are getting married." Amelia's tone was even, and she didn't even raise her head. "Don't worry, I won't compete with you," Miranda scoffed, clearly not believing her. Just as she was about to speak again, a shop assistant approached her. "Miss Coleman, we've selected the wedding dress and shoes. We just need to choose the matching jewelry. Would you like to do that now?" She nodded, but after the assistant displayed all the jewelry, Miranda barely glanced at them before expressing dissatisfaction and asking for new options. Even after seeing everything, she still hadn't found jewelry to her liking. As the staff stood there awkwardly, her gaze suddenly fell on the necklace around Amelia's neck. Her eyes lit up and her tone became imperious. "I like yours. How much is it? Sell it to me." Amelia froze, her hand reaching up to touch the silver planet-shaped pendant with diamonds. Her expression turned cold. It's not for sale. When I say I like something, it has to be mine. Seemingly surprised by the refusal, Miranda's face stiffened momentarily before she started trying to grab the necklace. Caught off guard, Amelia couldn't react in time, and Miranda managed to yank the necklace. Ignoring the stinging pain on her neck, Amelia reached out to take the necklace back, but it finally gave way under the force, breaking into 2 pieces. The planet pendant fell to the ground, shattering completely. Amelia's mind went blank, and she instinctively slapped Miranda across the face. Miranda's cheek instantly bore a red handprint. She touched her face in disbelief. "You dare to hit me." When Jackson returned, this was the scene that greeted him. His expression changed as he hurriedly stepped forward to push Amelia away. "Amelia Somerset, what are you doing?" Unprepared for the push, Amelia fell to the ground, her forehead hitting the corner of a nearby table. Bang! A sharp pain shot through her, and her forehead began seeping something sticky. Amelia reached up to touch it, finding her fingertips stained crimson. She looked up at Jackson, breathing raggedly, but the man who had caused her to bleed was now anxiously holding another woman, listening to her tearful complaints. "I just saw your secretary's necklace and wanted to buy it, but I accidentally broke it, and she hit me." Following Miranda's pointing finger, Jackson also noticed the shattered necklace. His expression suddenly froze, but when he finally looked at Amelia, his eyes showed only impatience. "It's just a trinket, was it worth hitting someone over?" His accusation was like the final straw that broke the camel's back, instantly bringing tears to Amelia's eyes. She didn't answer, just silently moved to where the necklace had fallen, picking up the pieces one by one. A trinket. He knew perfectly well it was a keepsake from her mother. She still remembered that winter when they had just gotten together, and she had accidentally lost the necklace in the snow. He had searched with a flashlight all night in the snow to find it for her. Exposed to the cold for so long, he came down with a high fever the next day. She had cried for a long time, holding him, worried sick. In the end, it was the sick man who comforted her. "I hate seeing you cry. Don't worry about one day. I would have searched for 3 days or 10 if that's what it took. Stop crying and keep it safe from now on." But now, when her necklace was broken by someone else, he said it was just a trinket. "Jackson Wells, if you don't love me, why did you pursue me in the first place?" Jackson left with Miranda in his arms, leaving Amelia alone, crouched on the ground, red-eyed as she collected all the pieces before stumbling away. For the next few days, she took sick leave and went to the hospital to get stitches for her wound. During this time, Jackson didn't come home. The day her wound had just healed, Veronica called her. "Amy, I saw a pair of earrings in Paris that would be perfect for you. I'm back in the country today, so come over for dinner and I'll give you your gift." She was planning to leave soon and needed to say goodbye to Veronica anyway, so Amelia didn't refuse. After getting ready and applying a thick layer of foundation to hide the wound on her forehead, she went out. When they met, Veronica was extremely excited, linking arms with her as they walked inside, talking about her recent travel experiences. Amelia listened quietly until after dinner when she finally mentioned her plans to return home for marriage. Hearing this sudden news, Veronica was thunderstruck. "Amy, why so sudden? What about your boyfriend?" Amelia shook her head. "I'm done with him." Seeing Amelia's dejected expression, Veronica might not have known the details, but she guessed that Amelia had been wronged. Both angry and heartbroken for her friend, she quickly embraced Amelia. "Good riddance, you should dump him. What kind of boyfriend stays hidden for years without going public? It's his fault for breaking your heart and driving you to accept an arranged marriage. Amy, you're my best friend. North City is so far away. When will we see each other again after you leave?" The thought of their impending separation left both women feeling down. Eventually, Veronica became so emotional that she began crying while hugging Amelia. Jackson had just returned when he witnessed this scene. He sighed with exasperation. "How old are you two, still crying in each other's arms?" Veronica straightened up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Amy's going home to get married. Why shouldn't I cry?" Jackson's heart suddenly skipped a beat as he turned sharply to look at Amelia, his expression instantly darkening. "You're getting married?" "Yes." Her gaze met his directly, without avoidance or concealment, as she nodded. "If you're free, Jackson, you're welcome to attend the ceremony." Hearing this, his face darkened further. He stepped forward and grabbed her hand, ready to leave. Veronica looked at him in confusion. "Brother, what are you doing?" Jackson paused but maintained his composure. "I have to go out anyway. I'll drive her home." Before Amelia could refuse, she was already being dragged to his car. Once inside, he pressed her against the seat, his face ashen. "Amy, I know you're still angry about what happened, but you can't joke about marriage," she smiled, surprised that despite her straightforward confession, he didn't believe her and thought she was just throwing a tantrum. "I'm not joking. Aren't you getting married too?" "Why can't I? I told you, what's between Miranda and me is fake." Before he could finish, Amelia interrupted him. "Fake, yet you took her to try on wedding dresses? Fake, yet you introduced her publicly? Fake, yet you let her humiliate me?" The rapid-fire questions left Jackson speechless. After a long pause, he finally rubbed his temples wearily. "So many people are watching me, I needed to make the act convincing." She laughed bitterly to herself. So was his behavior toward her also just an act? How considerate of him to keep up the charade even now that his true love had returned. "I know you're feeling wronged. Just bear with it a little longer, and I promise I'll make it up to you. Okay?" Having lost the argument, he seemed to think there was no point in arguing with a young woman like her, so his tone softened as he tried to coax her. But she maintained her serious expression and emphasized once more, "I am really going home to get married." Judging by his expression, he still didn't take her seriously. He just took a box that he had prepared earlier and handed it to her. "I've had your necklace repaired. Please don't make these kinds of jokes anymore." The car's engine drowned out what she was about to say. After a moment, she sat back in her seat and stopped trying to explain. Fine, if he didn't believe her, so be it. That evening, her father sent another message asking her to choose a wedding dress and ring, followed by a series of photos that nearly overwhelmed Amelia. As she was engrossed in selecting, Jackson emerged from the bedroom after his shower. Seeing her focused expression, he casually asked, "What are you looking at so intently?" She paused briefly, still choosing to be honest. "Wedding dresses and rings." She wasn't lying, but the man before her grew visibly irritated, his brows furrowing. "Didn't we agree not to mention this anymore?" Observing his annoyance and frustration, Amelia didn't bother to explain further. Soon enough, he would discover whether she was lying or not. She went to bed, putting everything out of her mind until the next morning when she woke to find her father had sent her a string of numbers. "Amy, this is the phone number of the man you're marrying. If you have any questions, you can contact him directly. Since you'll be married soon, it's good to talk more." After copying the number into her contacts, she realized she needed a name, but suddenly remembered that her father had never told her the name of her arranged marriage partner. Calling specifically to ask his name seemed inappropriate. After pondering for a moment, she suddenly thought of something and quickly typed a few characters into her phone. Since she didn't know his name, a generic contact name would do. With less than a month left before her departure, Amelia still had to go to work as usual. Several departments were organizing a networking event, including Amelia's department. What was meant to be an interdepartmental activity took an unexpected turn when Miranda and Jackson passed by in the afternoon and overheard their discussion. "A networking event? That sounds fun, Jackson. Why don't you join me? We can go to the French restaurant another time." The coquettish voice reached his ears as Miranda tugged at his sleeve in a playful pout. Jackson looked back at her, affectionately tapping her nose before changing course to accompany her inside. When the CEO expressed interest, none of the department heads dared refuse, and soon everyone proceeded to the pre-booked private room. However, with Jackson's participation, the group became noticeably subdued. People either tried to minimize their presence or hid in corners quietly sipping champagne. After a long silence, someone finally broke the ice by suggesting they play truth or dare. Games are indeed the best way to liven up the atmosphere. The mood quickly improved, with even Jackson joining in. In the first round, he lost. Given his status, no one dared suggest anything too outrageous. After much deliberation, they finally settled on a penalty. "Mr. Wells, let's see your photo gallery." Being a good sport, Jackson didn't refuse. He took out his phone, opened his gallery, and the contents became visible to everyone present. The gallery contained many photos, all of Miranda alone. The onlookers began to tease, marveling at the couple's relationship. All photos of the future Mrs. Wells, Mr. Wells, and Miss Coleman must really be in love. So many photos, it must have taken quite some time to capture them all. Amid the playful banter, even Miranda showed signs of shyness, her cheeks flushing as she gently scolded him. "When did you take so many pictures? I had no idea." Jackson merely smiled without answering, his gaze cutting through the crowd to land directly on Amelia at the periphery. Fearing she might make a scene, he carefully observed her reaction, but she appeared disinterested, quietly sipping her drink with downcast eyes, seemingly having paid no attention to the discussion since the beginning. For some reason, this made him feel somewhat uneasy. He put away his phone, shutting out everyone's view, and when no one was looking in his direction, he quietly composed a message and sent it. Amelia soon received a notification. Opening it, she found just a short line. "It's all fake, don't mind it." She laughed sardonically. At this point, what difference did truth or falsehood make? Soon the second round of the game began, and this time Amelia lost. Facing her, everyone was noticeably more relaxed, with fewer inhibitions when deciding on her penalty. "Secretary Somerset, your penalty is to call the first contact in your phone list." Amelia didn't resist. She took out her phone, opened her contacts, and revealed the pinned contact at the top. "Future husband." Seeing her contact name, her colleagues were visibly excited but failed to notice Jackson's instantly ashen face behind them. He abruptly stood up, startling everyone and halting their encouragement for Amelia to make the call. After a moment of silence, a manager cautiously asked, "Mr. Wells, is something wrong? This is boring. Let's call it a day." With that, he left with Miranda. The remaining attendees exchanged bewildered glances, unsure what had offended him, but since he had spoken, the networking event could only come to an abrupt end. Amelia quietly put away her phone and followed the others downstairs. Just as she was about to hail a taxi home, the familiar Maybach stopped in front of her again. The window rolled down, and though his words were directed at her, they were clearly an explanation for Miranda sitting beside him. "You're Veronica's best friend. We'll give you a ride home." Amelia glanced at him, not wanting to create a bigger scene, and obediently opened the back door and got in. The car gradually entered the flow of traffic, heading toward the Coleman family mansion. Throughout the journey, Miranda chatted incessantly, reminiscing about the past with Jackson, who focused on driving but didn't forget to respond occasionally when she became particularly animated. Amelia turned her gaze to the window, tuning them out. When the car finally stopped at the Coleman mansion, Miranda reluctantly said goodbye at the door. Only after watching her silhouette disappear did he return to the car, but instead of getting into the driver's seat, he directly opened the back door and, with an air of non-negotiability, grabbed the back of her head and kissed her forcefully. MMPH. Amelia's eyes widened in shock as she immediately tried to push him away, but to no avail. When he forced her lips apart and deepened the kiss, she closed her eyes and bit down hard. He hissed in pain and finally backed away, touching the blood at the corner of his mouth, but at least he had calmed down. His eyes were dark and filled with emotions she couldn't decipher. He pressed his lips together before speaking. "Amy, throwing a tantrum once is fine, but 2 or 3 times is getting old." Clearly, he was referring to her marriage claims. She had shown him bridal selections right in front of him and now had a contact saved as future husband. Although angry, he still believed she was just acting out. But this time, he was completely wrong. "I'm not throwing a tantrum. I really am getting married." She turned away, refusing to look at him. Her breathing was still uneven from the kiss, but her voice was firm. However, it was evident he didn't believe her. He returned to the driver's seat, pausing before speaking again. "Fine, I'll give you a few days off. I'll spend time with you properly, so stop this nonsense." The car slowly drove away. No one noticed that on the second floor of the Coleman mansion, in a lit room, Miranda stood by the window, having witnessed everything. Over the next few days, Jackson kept his word and stayed home with Amelia without leaving. During this time, she often overheard him making phone calls in his study, occasionally mentioning roses and birthdays. Neither Amelia nor Jackson's birthdays were coming up, so it was obvious who he was planning for. "If you have business to attend to, go ahead. Don't feel obligated to keep me company." After once again overhearing him on the phone in his study, she stood in the doorway, looking at him with calm, unruffled eyes, yet something in her gaze made Jackson's breath catch. After a long moment of eye contact, he finally relented and confessed, though still trying to justify himself. "I am planning a birthday party for Miranda. With so many people watching, we need to maintain appearances." Perhaps because he had come clean, Jackson became even more blatant about handling these matters in front of Amelia, no longer bothering to hide. Watching him busy himself, she inwardly scoffed. She knew the Wells family couldn't force Jackson to do anything now that he had full control of the company. Only love could. Soon it was the day of the birthday party. Jackson didn't invite Amelia, and she had no desire to attend, so she stayed home alone. But shortly after he left, she received a call from Miranda. "Jackson is going to propose today, but he left the engagement ring at home. Secretary Somerset, could you bring it over?" Her voice carried a hint of contempt for Amelia. Since she didn't want to go, Amelia refused directly. "I'm not available. Find someone else to deliver it. Are you afraid of fainting from heartbreak when you see Jackson proposing to me?" Hearing her refusal, Miranda wasn't angered. Instead, her voice took on a note of smug satisfaction. After a moment of silence, Amelia didn't respond to Miranda's final jab but agreed to the request. "Send me the address." After receiving the message, Amelia went to Jackson's study and found the carefully preserved ring in the drawer. She paused when she saw it. Back then, Jackson had mysteriously bought home an engagement ring. She had thought it was meant for her and had silently anticipated it for a long time. But now, she took out the ring, her fingers tracing the engraved initials, MQY, on the inside band, finally understanding that this ring had always been prepared for Miranda Coleman. She securely pocketed the ring and took a taxi to the venue. The birthday party was held at another mansion owned by Jackson. Miranda was on the 3rd floor. Without overthinking it, Amelia went directly upstairs. But just as she reached the 2nd floor landing, a sleazy-looking man suddenly lunged at her, caught completely off guard. Amelia was firmly trapped in his arms as she instinctively tried to scream for help. The man immediately tried to kiss her, his voice lecherous. "Beautiful lady, don't struggle. Miss Coleman specifically paid me to spend a passionate night with you. Even if you scream, no one will come to save you. Now let me have a taste," he grinned obscenely, and as he spoke, the nauseating mixture of tobacco and alcohol assaulted her senses. Amelia was horrified and quickly turned her head to avoid his attempted kiss. She pushed against him, trying desperately to break free. But her struggles seemed to merely tickle the man, who blocked her screams while dragging her toward an unlocked room nearby. "How much did she pay you? I'll give you double if you let me go," Amelia pleaded with a trembling voice during a brief respite. But the man paid no attention and, after locking the door, pinned her against the wall. One hand restrained her right arm while the other roamed her body, his head moving down her neck. "If you touch me, neither the Wells nor the Somerset families will let you get away with it." Swallowing her disgust, she tried threatening him while her free left hand desperately searched for something to fight back with. The man's mocking laughter echoed in her ear. "The worst I'll face is jail, and I'm not afraid of." Before he could finish, Amelia smashed a vase against his head. The sharp pain made him touch his head, finding it covered in blood. His eyes rolled back and he passed out. Trembling all over, Amelia unlocked the door and rushed toward the banquet hall. As expected, Miranda stood in the center of the crowd, basking in everyone's compliments. Anger surged within her. She charged directly at Miranda, pushing her forcefully with a loud crash. Miranda lost her balance and fell against the champagne tower behind her. The alcohol soaked her dress, and the glass shards cut her exposed legs, leaving bloody gashes. The fury in Amelia's heart remained unabated. Jackson, who had rushed over, looked at the scene with rage. He stepped forward to lift the pale-faced Miranda, giving Amelia only a single glance before turning to leave without a word. That one look made her feel as though she had been plunged into an icy lake. He had never looked at her with such cold eyes before. The murmurs of the crowd reached her ears, but she pressed her lips together, still not feeling she had done anything wrong. She took a taxi back to the mansion. That night, Jackson returned home in a fury, his voice filled with suppressed anger. "I told you the birthday party was just for show. You couldn't handle it for a few days. You had to go cause trouble for Miranda?" Hearing his accusation, Amelia's lips tightened, but her eyes remained defiant as she looked at him. "I caused trouble. She's the one who hired someone to try to rape me. There are security cameras in the hallway. If you don't believe me, go check." Enough, her explanation failed to convince Jackson. Instead, his brows furrowed even deeper in displeasure. After staring at her for a moment, Amelia could see his unconditional trust in Miranda reflected in his eyes. Miranda isn't that kind of person, don't blame her, because you attracted unwanted attention. Now come with me to apologize to her. I did nothing wrong. Why should I apologize? I won't go. He tried to force her to the hospital, but she struggled free. The look in her eyes was a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. Seeing her still stubbornly refusing to admit fault, his face darkened. No longer willing to argue, he called for his security team. Take her to the hospital. When Amelia was escorted to the hospital by the security guards, she found Miranda nestled in Jackson's arms. Seeing her approach, Miranda continued to shed tears, maintaining her pitiful appearance. Amelia had been forced there against her will and now looked disheveled. Yet Jackson seemed blind to her condition, staring at her coldly as if she were some heinous criminal. In that moment, her throat constricted and any words of defense died on her lips. She suddenly felt exhausted, the light in her eyes extinguished. Fine, I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for loving you, for wasting years of my youth entangled with you. I was indeed wrong, catastrophically wrong. She no longer looked at either of them and simply walked out after freeing herself from the security guard's grip. Jackson hadn't expected Amelia's attitude to change so quickly. After a moment of shock, he watched her retreating figure with an inexplicable sense of panic. But Miranda was still softly crying in his arms, so he turned his attention back to her. For the next few days, he was busy taking care of Miranda and didn't return home. But every day when Amelia opened the door, she would find gifts left at the mansion entrance. She didn't accept a single one, instead packaging them all and donating them. The next morning, just after she finished breakfast, her phone suddenly rang. Amy, what do you mean by donating all the gifts? This whole thing was your fault to begin with. I try to make it up to you, and now I'm the one who got it wrong. You weren't this difficult to please before. Jackson's voice carried a hint of fatigue. Stop this nonsense, okay? You used to be much easier to comfort. Amelia didn't respond to his words, though her actions paused briefly. She suddenly remembered when they had first gotten together. Back then, when she was hurt or upset, just a hug from him was enough. But that was because the old Amelia loved Jackson Wells. Now she had seen through his lies and no longer loved him. During the silence, faint sounds of Miranda's voice came from his end. The medicine is so bitter. She laughed softly and finally spoke. Focus on taking good care of Miss Coleman. It's all fake. Just as Jackson started to explain again, Amelia cut him off. Even if it's fake, it has to be convincing to the whole world, right? Isn't that what you said? After finishing, she quickly hung up, not giving him a chance to respond. She had no time for his games anymore. Her 1-month notice period was over, and she could leave. After breakfast, she changed clothes and went to the office to complete her final resignation procedures. Then she returned home and began packing her belongings. By evening, Jackson arrived at the mansion with armfuls of gifts. When he saw her, his demeanor was no longer as confrontational as during their previous encounters. He placed the gifts aside before embracing her. Amy, my wedding date with Miranda is approaching. Both families want her to move in, and it wouldn't be appropriate for you to stay here anymore. Would you mind staying at the Ocean View Villa for a while? Don't overthink it. Once this charade is over and the business deal between our families is sealed, I'll bring you back. Amelia knew Jackson had a villa in Ocean View, but she had rarely been there because it was so far from their current location, one in the north, one in the south. Hearing him say this, she inwardly scoffed. So now that he had a proper wife at home, he wanted to keep her tucked away as a hidden mistress. On the way over, Jackson had been mentally preparing for the storm that would erupt when Amelia heard this news. He had even bought so many gifts to appease her. To his surprise, her expression remained calm, and she didn't make a scene. After he finished speaking, she simply responded with a placid, I understand. All his prepared scenarios came to nothing. She had finally become sensible, but somehow, he felt oddly dissatisfied. He was about to help her pack when his eyes fell on her open suitcase and the half-packed belongings already inside. His pupils constricted sharply. Why are you already packing? Amelia didn't even look up, her tone still even. I've already told you many times I'm going home to get married. Hearing this again, Jackson's initially tense heart relaxed. He rubbed his temples. "Stop with the nonsense. I've been really stressed lately, Amy. When all this is over, I'll make our relationship public, okay?" At his words, Amelia finally looked at him. She didn't understand. He had only used her as a substitute, so shouldn't he be happy she was getting married? According to what he had said initially, wasn't he afraid to break up with her because he thought she couldn't handle the truth? Now she had accepted it calmly and was ready to marry someone else. So why didn't he believe her? Why was he reluctant to let go? Amelia couldn't figure it out and didn't want to waste more energy trying. She placed the last item in her suitcase and silently moved it to the door. "I'll drive you there." Jackson's car was already parked outside the villa. Seeing she was about to walk past him, he quickly caught up and took her suitcase, intending to put it in his trunk. She didn't refuse. This time, she would let him personally drive her to the airport. That way, he would finally believe. Just as they were about to get in the car, his phone rang. It was Miranda. He hesitated before walking a few steps away to answer. When he returned, he had arranged for a new car and explained briefly. "Amy, I need to leave for a while. I've called another car for you. I'll come visit you later." Watching him get into his car and gradually disappear into the traffic, she finally let a small, bitter smile cross her lips. "Jackson Wells, you've missed your last chance to learn the truth." She got into the waiting taxi, pulled out her phone, and blocked all of Jackson's contact methods before turning to the driver, who was routinely asking about the destination. "To Ocean View Villa?" She shook her head. "To the airport." At North City Airport, the petite Amelia Somerset had just wheeled her luggage through the terminal when she spotted a man waiting outside. Impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his refined features turned heads even as he simply stood there. Several young women were positioned not far from him, whispering among themselves. One occasionally nudged another with her elbow, seemingly encouraging her to approach him for contact information. But perhaps his aura was too aloof, as the woman kept shaking her head, adamantly refusing to step forward. Just then, the man noticed something and his furrowed brows relaxed. The ice seemed to melt away as a perfectly measured smile curved his lips. He nodded in Amelia's direction. The group of women followed his gaze and spotted the equally eye-catching Amelia among the crowd. The next moment, the man they had been observing for so long finally moved, walking toward Amelia. Seeing this, the women could only sigh. The woman who had been encouraged earlier exhaled with obvious relief, wearing an "I told you so" expression. "I knew he was waiting for someone. He's definitely taken. Good thing I didn't go over, that would have been so embarrassing." Their discussion reached Amelia's ears just as the man came to stand before her. Looking at his face, she felt her ears begin to burn. He extended his hand with a gentle smile and introduced himself. "Miss Somerset, hello. I'm Timothy Sinclair, your arranged marriage partner." Meanwhile, back in Y City, Miranda moved into Jackson's mansion the very next day and thoroughly cleaned the entire place, removing everything that didn't belong there and replacing it with the couple's items she had brought. It was only then that he suddenly realized Amelia hadn't taken any of their shared possessions when she left. Recalling how she had repeatedly mentioned going home for an arranged marriage during that period, irritation gave way to a twinge of panic. But surely she loved him too much to actually leave. The girl was probably just throwing a tantrum. After his wedding was over, he'd make time to accompany her properly, comfort her, and eventually she would accept the situation. Amelia loved him so much, how could he possibly let her go? But it wasn't until his wedding day with Miranda that Jackson belatedly realized she hadn't contacted him for a very long time. His friends had arrived early at the venue and, seeing his distracted state, teased him. "Finally marrying your true love, are you so happy you're in a daze? You need to snap out of it. You'll be on stage soon." To their surprise, he shook his head, still wearing that worried expression. "The wedding is such a big affair. Amelia must have seen the news. I wonder how she's doing." The group was stunned, but seeing his expression was genuine, they were shocked. "Seriously, Jackson, it's your wedding day with Miranda, and you're thinking about your secretary. Jackson, don't tell me you actually fell for her. What about Miranda?" Hearing Miranda's name jolted Jackson back to reality. He took a deep breath before responding, "I, of course, love Miranda. The wedding with her will definitely proceed. It's just that I strung the girl along for 7 years and feel somewhat guilty. Anyway, let's not discuss this. When I get back, I'll just need to comfort her more." He turned and walked toward the altar, seemingly having put the matter behind him. But his hand still gripped his phone tightly, as if waiting for a message. As he passed by the guest section, fragments of conversations suddenly reached his ears. "Have you heard? The Somerset heiress from North City and the Sinclair heir have announced their engagement. It's happening any day now. Have you seen the bride's photo? Why does she look so familiar?" "You don't know. The Somerset heiress studied finance in Y City, but went straight to work at the Wells Group after graduation. She became CEO Wells's secretary. I met her during a business negotiation, a lovely girl. North City's Somerset family, a Y City college graduate, his secretary." Connecting these details, the answer became immediately apparent. Jackson felt his mind go blank, unable to believe what he was hearing. With trembling hands, he took out his phone and opened the news page. The top headline was indeed about the Sinclair and Somerset family's engagement. Clicking through, the center image showed none other than Amelia Somerset smiling radiantly while holding Timothy Sinclair's arm. Jackson exited the page and quickly scrolled through his contacts to find that familiar number he knew by heart. But when he called, he discovered he had been blocked. He tried all possible methods: texts, messages, every platform he could think of, only to find he had been blocked everywhere, and even removed as a friend, whether from panic or anger. He abruptly turned and headed for the waiting room. Just as he was about to enter, he heard suspicious whispering from inside. He frowned, initially thinking thieves had broken in, and was about to call security when he recognized Miranda's voice. "You failed to complete the task I hired you for, yet you have the audacity to demand payment?" She seemed to be in conversation with someone, and the exchange wasn't pleasant. Concerned, he remained outside without entering or leaving. A moment later, a man's voice responded. Always saying, soon, Miss Coleman, I risked my life trying to ruin that secretary as you requested. I ended up with a massive gash on my head, and you won't even cover the medical expenses. Aren't you afraid I'll expose everything and ruin your chances of becoming Mrs. Wells?" The threat in his words was unmistakable, making Miranda's heart race. Just as she was about to placate him, the door was flung open with a bang. Both turned in shock to see Jackson standing in the doorway, his face dark with fury and his eyes burning with anger. "You hired someone to violate Amy's dignity?" Jackson suddenly recalled that night when he returned to confront Amelia. She had stubbornly refused to admit fault, insisting that Miranda was the true instigator, that Miranda had hired someone to attack her, and that there was even security camera footage he could check if he didn't believe her. How had he responded then? He had said, "Miranda isn't that kind of person." He also remembered Amelia's expression when he forced her to apologize to Miranda, lifeless, devoid of any emotion. What had been going through her mind at that moment? His throat constricted with an inexplicable pain that spread throughout his body. Meanwhile, the person in front of him was frantically trying to defend herself. "It's not what you think, Jackson. This man snuck in to harm me, and I'm just playing along with his story to protect myself." Jackson might believe she was merely protecting herself, but how would a random intruder fabricate such a specific story? It would be laughable to suggest otherwise. The man, seeing Miranda deflecting all blame onto him, and intimidated by the menacing aura emanating from Jackson, hastily tried to clear his name from a safe distance. "Don't listen to her lies. I have phone recordings, chat logs, and even transaction records here. If it weren't for my injury and her refusal to pay the remaining amount, I wouldn't be here." As he spoke, he glared hatefully at Miranda, who had scrambled to Jackson's side. Tapping a few times on his phone, he played an audio clip for all to hear. $10,000 to target someone, ruin her reputation. I'll give you another $20,000 after it's done. I'll send you the time and location later. I've lured her over. Come now. I've sent you the address and her photo." Miranda's voice was unmistakable. Jackson quickly realized the man wasn't lying. His expression grew even darker as he looked down at Miranda clinging to his leg. The coldness in his eyes made her spine tingle. Rage consumed his rational thought, making him forget that this woman had been the object of his affection for 10 years. With a forceful kick, he violently pushed her away. The sudden assault left Miranda in shock and pain, tears streaming down her face. She opened her mouth but couldn't make a sound, watching helplessly as he made a phone call and then left, closing the door behind him. Jackson had never imagined that Miranda, whom he had believed to be kind and gentle, could do such a thing. What shocked him even more was that his first thought upon hearing about this was, Amelia suffered so much injustice, she must be furious right now. He hurried out of the banquet hall and headed straight for the underground parking garage. After retrieving his car, he drove off at high speed. Meanwhile, the phone he had carelessly tossed aside began vibrating incessantly. The calls kept coming one after another until, annoyed, he finally turned it off. At last, silence. His car finally stopped in front of the villa in Ocean View District. He pushed open the door and entered, but the villa was quiet and empty, without a trace of human habitation. He stood stunned for a moment before letting out a self-mocking laugh, so she had never even come here. Somewhat at a loss, he stood there as the truth he had clung to suddenly collapsed. Still unwilling to give up, he turned his phone back on. The flood of missed calls and messages made his device freeze for a full 5 minutes before finally returning to normal. Ignoring all the messages asking his whereabouts, he went straight to Veronica's contact and called her. She answered quickly, clearly also looking for him. Her voice was filled with anxiety. "Brother, the wedding has started, where are you? And why did you lock up Miss Coleman?" The questions came one after another, but he had no time to answer them. Instead, he urgently asked about Amelia. "Veronica, can you contact Amy?" Veronica was taken aback, surprised that her missing brother would finally answer a call only to ask about Amelia instead of explaining himself or addressing the wedding. "I can, actually. She even sent me photos today of her fiancé. He's wealthy, powerful, and treats her well much better than her previous boyfriend who wouldn't even go public with their relationship." "Hello? Hello, brother." The call was suddenly disconnected. Veronica stared at her phone in confusion, realizing she hadn't even asked about Jackson's current situation. Remembering the angry Mr. and Mrs. Coleman guarding their tearful daughter, she found herself in a dilemma as she redialed his number. This time, however, the call wouldn't go through. He had turned off his phone again. Veronica let out a long sigh. If she had made a mistake, let the law deal with her, rather than having her brother run away from his wedding, leaving their parents to handle the mess while tasking her with finding him. Suddenly, a notification sound rang out. Checking her phone, she realized Jackson had sent her an email. Confused about why he would use email instead of just telling her directly, she nevertheless opened it. The first thing she saw was a video clip security camera footage from a stairwell. The video clearly showed Miranda sneaking a man in and instructing him to wait for someone coming upstairs. It captured how she incited the man to ruin Amelia's reputation, then recorded the man lunging at Amelia when she arrived. She also clicked on the accompanying audio file, and after hearing its contents, she abruptly stood up and slammed her hand on the table. "Mr. and Mrs. Coleman, instead of questioning why my brother fled the wedding, perhaps you should explain what your precious daughter was planning to do." The audio played loudly through the speakers, with the clear voices of a man and woman in conversation. Miranda's face instantly turned ashen. Despite her tear-stained face and swollen eyes creating a pitiful image, Veronica wasn't swayed. "Amelia is my best friend, and anyone who dares bully her will find the Wells family has no room for them. Meanwhile, elsewhere." Amelia followed Alexander Somerset as he escorted Timothy Sinclair to the door. Their conversation had clearly gone well, with smiles all around. As Timothy stepped out of the mansion, Alexander turned to his daughter, coughing suggestively and raising his eyebrows, indicating she should see Timothy off. Sensing the expectation, Timothy stopped and waited for her decision. Under the intense gaze of both men, Amelia couldn't refuse. She reluctantly stepped forward with a smile. "Mr. Sinclair, I'll walk with you a bit." Timothy fell into step beside her, though his gaze remained fixed on her, making her somewhat uncomfortable. Just as she was beginning to feel awkward, he finally shifted his focus elsewhere and suddenly broke the silence. "Our wedding is in 3 days." Hearing him abruptly mention the wedding, Amelia was startled, half expecting him to say something about maintaining distance. But she quickly realized she was mistaken. "Does Amy intend to keep calling me Mr. Sinclair?" His voice carried a hint of amusement, but listening carefully, one could detect a note of complaint. However, Amelia was too preoccupied with what he had just called her to notice his tone. It wasn't that no one had called her Amy before. Her friends, Veronica, her father, even Jackson had used this name. But somehow, when Timothy said it, it felt entirely different. She maintained her composure despite her embarrassment, though the telltale redness of her earlobes betrayed her discomfort. He noticed this but didn't back down. Instead, he moved closer and asked, "I hope you haven't saved my contact as Mr. Sinclair too?" "No, I haven't." This time, Amelia clearly heard the accusation in his voice and hurriedly shook her head. But when she recalled what she had actually saved his contact as, the flush spread from her earlobes to her cheeks. If Timothy had only been casually asking before, her reaction now sparked genuine curiosity about her chosen contact name for him. Without warning, he took out his phone and dialed her number. Her phone rang loudly, and as she fumbled to hang up, he quickly positioned himself beside her, catching a glimpse of her screen. "Future husband." Seeing these words, Timothy felt immense satisfaction. He smiled and prevented her from hanging up, bringing his own phone next to hers to show her his contact name for her. "Wife." She recoiled as if shocked, hastily withdrawing her hand and weakly muttering, "Childish." "Yes, I'm being childish," Timothy acknowledged without concern, putting away his phone. After watching her quickly end the call and pocket her device, he laughed softly. "If Amy would remove the word future, I could be even more childish." Amelia didn't respond, looking around to change the subject when her gaze suddenly caught a familiar figure. The man stood some distance away, breathless as if he had run all the way there. The brief joy in his eyes vanished when he noticed the man at her side. She froze momentarily, but quickly regained her composure, looking away with all emotion wiped from her face. Timothy sensed her brief hesitation and looked in the direction she had been staring. His gaze met Jackson's cold one. Pushing his gold-rimmed glasses up his nose, he looked back down at Amelia and asked, "You know him?" The slightly raised intonation prompted her to press her lips together before eventually nodding. "Former boss." Jackson, who had approached close enough to hear her casual description, felt a sharp pain in his heart. He opened his mouth to explain, but faltered when he met her impersonal gaze, the kind one would give a stranger. No words would come. Timothy sensed the unusual atmosphere between them. Perhaps it was because the man's stare was too direct, making his interest hard to miss. Timothy became inwardly vigilant. Was this man trying to steal his future wife? Though his mind raced, his expression remained neutral. "Wasn't Amy previously a secretary in Y City? How did your former boss end up here? Is there something so important it couldn't be discussed by phone, requiring the CEO himself to travel all this way?" Jackson bristled at Timothy's provocation, his expression darkening. But he hadn't come to argue with Timothy, so he ignored the comment and looked directly at Amelia. Amy, I need to speak with you privately. Could you spare me a moment?" The forced change in how he addressed her made his voice hoarse. His eyes betrayed his anxiety as he tried to smile, terrified she would outright refuse. His fear proved warranted. She shook her head, maintaining a safe social distance and responding with professional detachment. "Mr. Wells, whatever you have to say, please say it now. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to be alone with someone else when my fiancé is present." Jackson's heart sank, his smile freezing as her blunt mention of fiancé hit him hard. After a long moment, he spoke again. "You're really getting married?" The moment she heard this question, Amelia couldn't help but laugh derisively. Thinking for a moment, she turned to look at Timothy, but before she could speak, he nodded understandingly. "You two talk." He walked some distance away, but as he turned his back to Amelia, his eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed there was indeed something between them, but based on their current interaction, whatever Jackson Wells was to Amelia, he was firmly in the X category now. Given this, Timothy felt confident enough to trust Amelia. Once he was out of earshot, she turned back to Jackson. Her eyes were calm and unruffled as she spoke, her words barbed. "Mr. Wells, for a CEO of a listed company, you seem to have developed hearing and vision problems at such a young age. If I recall correctly, I've explained many times that I'm really going home to get married. Even if you couldn't hear me, surely you saw the Somerset Sinclair engagement news that was trending recently." Amelia truly didn't understand Jackson's mindset. If he loved her, how could he have used her as a substitute for 7 years, then abandon her without hesitation when Miranda returned, forcing her to become a secret mistress scorned by all? He had never given her the trust she deserved, allowing Miranda to humiliate her repeatedly. But if he didn't love her, shouldn't her departure to marry someone else be exactly what he wanted? Why had he traveled all the way to North City to find her? And according to recent news, wasn't today supposed to be his wedding day with Miranda? Why wasn't he in Y City marrying Miranda instead of running to North City to find her? Seeing her questioning look, Jackson quickly explained his intentions. "Amy, I'm so sorry. I know everything now. I was wrong to blame you. I didn't realize Miranda could be so vicious. I apologize and beg your forgiveness. I truly regret my actions. You're only engaged to him to spite me, right? Give me one more chance. Come back to Y City with me. I promise, no more pretending I don't care about anything else. I just want to be with you. I'll make our relationship public immediately. I swear," he said so much at once, not knowing how much of it Amelia actually absorbed. All he knew was that he could almost hear his own heart pounding in his ears. He hoped desperately that she would nod, that she would smile at him, even if it was followed by reproach, saying that if he ever hurt her again, she would never forgive him. He would swear on his life that from now on, he would never let her down. She smiled, making his heart race even faster as he smiled foolishly in return. But with one word, she crushed all his hopes, grinding them underfoot. "No!" She seemed to take pleasure in watching his smile crumble, leaving him bewildered. She then enumerated his sins one by one. "Jackson Wells, from the moment I accepted this arranged marriage, I was saying goodbye to you. After all, I'm not the type of person who would use someone as a substitute for 7 years, arrange an engagement with someone else, and then lie to my partner of 7 years that it's all fake. Jackson Wells, I will only have one person in my life, someone who won't see me as a replacement for someone else, who won't use grand excuses to refuse to acknowledge me publicly. That person will definitely not be you." Only now did Jackson realize that Amelia had known everything all along. She knew he had used her as a 7-year substitute. She knew about his real engagement to Miranda, despite his clumsy lies. She knew all his hesitations, which was why she had abandoned him without a second thought. He opened his mouth but couldn't utter a single word, despondent as he watched her smile fade, her eyes reflecting nothing but disgust when she looked at him. Tears welled up in his eyes, but Jackson fought hard not to let them fall, causing his eyes to redden from the effort. Yet as he watched Amelia turn to leave, a sense of desperation surged from within. They had been together for 7 years, from her 18th to her 25th birthday. Her most beautiful years had been spent by his side. Their relationship should have been the most vivid chapter in her life. How could she cast him aside so easily? "Amy," Jackson's choked, tearful voice rang out behind her, but this time she didn't even pause. She walked straight toward Timothy, even breaking into a small run as she approached him. Jackson suddenly remembered when they had first gotten together. Back then, all his feelings for her stemmed from Miranda. He was captivated by her face, spending nights entwined with her, and after she had fallen into deep sleep, he would pull her into his arms and softly call her Miranda. He knew he was a beast, deceiving a young girl into believing his carefully crafted lies. This filled him with guilt toward her. Unable to give her love, he compensated in other ways. Romance, money, promises, everything except going public with their relationship. He thought that if Miranda ever returned, they could part amicably, and Amelia wouldn't face public scrutiny. She could completely separate herself from him. That was probably when she loved him most. Whenever they met for dates, she would approach him step by step, just like now, breaking into a small run as she got closer. He had calculated everything except that in their 7th year together, when Miranda returned and he finally secured a marriage with her, his friends advised him to let go, but he suddenly found himself reluctant. So he pretended nothing was wrong to Amelia, continuing to deceive her, claiming the engagement was fake, just for show. He never anticipated she would discover the truth so early and plan her escape from him. When had it started? Perhaps the day news of his engagement to Miranda spread. She had clearly been crying, yet when he explained, she seemed to let it go too easily. If she hadn't known the truth, she should have made a scene, demanding to know when he would finally give her official recognition. Even that resignation letter was submitted to HR the very next day. Jackson couldn't remember signing Amelia's resignation. When he learned of her resignation, he was shocked. He asked HR and obtained that resignation form, only realizing after seeing the date that she had indeed brought several documents for him to sign that day. He had reviewed all the previous documents, but had signed the final one without looking when Miranda was injured. Reflecting on it now, he finally noticed the anomaly. He had been too slow to recognize such obvious changes he should have noticed much earlier. He had made a terrible mistake and truly regretted it. Even if she wouldn't give him another chance, Jackson wanted to fight for himself one last time. He took out his phone, gazing at the two retreating figures in the distance, and after the call connected, he spoke first. "Veronica, you're Amy's best friend. Her wedding is in 3 days. Will you attend?" Veronica, who had just finished dealing with the fallout between the Wells and Coleman families with her parents, was still somewhat resentful. After all, Miranda's targeting of Amelia was inevitably connected to Jackson, and he had simply walked away, leaving her to clean up the mess. But hearing these words, her eyes suddenly lit up with joy. "You're in North City. I want to go." Jackson knew that if only he attended Amelia's wedding, she might not let him in. But with Veronica present, Amelia would never turn her away. He could simply accompany Veronica inside, and after that, he wouldn't need Veronica's help anymore. The 3 days passed in a blur. Veronica arrived in North City the day before the wedding. To maintain an element of surprise, she waited until she reached North City before messaging Amelia. Their reunion was naturally full of excitement. Though Veronica didn't understand why Jackson insisted on accompanying her to the venue, she didn't question it further. After obtaining a special invitation, she proudly waved it at him. The red color of the invitation card pierced Jackson's heart. He clenched his jaw, careful not to reveal any distress. Feigning indifference, he pushed her into another room before returning to his own to try on the suits that had just been delivered. After selecting the one that best showcased his appearance, he forced himself to sleep despite his inner turmoil. Tomorrow, he would appear before Amelia looking his absolute best. And then, he would stop her wedding. The Somerset Sinclair wedding was held at North City's most luxurious hotel. Jackson had dressed early and was urging Veronica to hurry to the hotel. Looking at the well-dressed man, she felt increasingly uneasy. "Why are you so formally dressed for Amy's wedding with Timothy?" Ignoring Veronica's furrowed brows, he cleared his throat and found an excuse. "She's your best friend, was my secretary, and suffered harm because of me. Of course I should treat her major life event with respect." Although still feeling something was off, Veronica eventually accepted his answer, giving him a sidelong glance and snorting. "You'd better remember to give a generous red envelope." Jackson nodded slightly, a dark look flashing in his eyes. The red envelope would certainly be substantial. If Amelia agreed to leave with him, he would willingly hand over all his shares in the Wells Group. As for Timothy Sinclair, he snorted dismissively. If the Sinclair heir objected, he could always find him another bride. Jackson's thoughts were full of optimism as he followed Veronica into the hotel. The wedding venue was bustling with activity, with many guests in attendance. After arriving, Veronica went directly backstage to find Amelia, leaving Jackson alone in the hall. Soon, the wedding ceremony began. Amelia, dressed in an exquisite custom wedding gown, walked up to the stage on her father's arm. Even through the translucent veil, her smile was visible as she approached Timothy waiting at the center. In the audience, Jackson's eyes reddened slightly. Hearing about it countless times couldn't compare to the impact of seeing her in a wedding dress walking toward someone else. He had thought he could face this calmly, but only now did he realize he simply couldn't accept it. On stage, the officiant continued with the ceremony. Amelia heard the question, "Do you agree to become Mr. Sinclair's wife, in poverty or wealth, in sickness or in health, without change?" She turned to look at the man beside her, handsome, with gentle features that perfectly balanced the sharpness of his tailored suit. Sensing her gaze, he smiled warmly in return. Amelia still felt somewhat dazed. Not long ago, she had been Jackson's secret girlfriend, waiting in vain for public acknowledgement. Now, in just a week, she was about to become someone else's wife. Suddenly, she felt a warm touch on her palm. Looking at Timothy's pursed lips, she snapped back to reality, just about to say, "I do," when a commotion erupted in the audience. She turned to look and frowned when she saw who was causing the disturbance. Wait, Jackson's suit, rivaling that of the groom, drew attention. Combined with his sudden interruption, it sparked whispers among the guests. Is he trying to object to the wedding? Isn't that the CEO of Wells Group from Y-City? I didn't know he had any connection to the bride or groom. And didn't he just have his own wedding recently? That wedding? Don't mention it. He ran away, and I heard the engagement was called off that same day. Jackson blocked out all the murmurs, focusing solely on Amelia. Veronica, sitting in the audience, was moved by her friend's newfound happiness, but was mortified by her brother's outburst. She tried to hide her face while attempting to drag him away, muttering, "Today is my best friend's wedding day. Brother, if you want to cause a scene, do it somewhere else, not at Amy's wedding." Despite her deliberately lowered voice, it failed to bring Jackson to his senses. He stood firm, his gaze fixated on Amelia on stage. "Amy, I wronged you in the past. I realize my mistake now. I had intended to let go and wish you happiness, but seeing you walk towards someone else made me realize I can't do it. Will you come with me? I swear I will never hurt you again, not even a hair on your head." The depth of emotion and loss in his eyes nearly moved the audience to tears. Veronica, after hearing this confession, suddenly connected the dots. She seemed to understand everything now. On stage, Amelia met Jackson's gaze, absorbing his remorse and regret, yet her expression remained unchanged. She merely tilted her head slightly, maintaining eye contact as she spoke with genuine confusion. "What do you mean, Mr. Wells? I was only your former secretary. Wells Group is wealthy and influential. Surely you can find another secretary. Besides, if you wanted to recruit me back, this isn't the appropriate setting for such ambiguous statements." With these few sentences, she completely severed any connection between them. The audience looked from the stage to the floor and back, their minds racing. They had never heard of any entanglement between Jackson Wells and Amelia Somerset. The recent Wells-Coleman wedding drama had been widely publicized. Considering the close timing of the two weddings, some began to speculate. Perhaps Amelia had harbored feelings for Jackson and, learning of his marriage, finally realized she had no chance, so she returned home for an arranged marriage. But judging by their current behavior, that didn't seem to be the case. At the center of this speculation, Jackson's face had turned deathly pale after hearing her words. His past manipulation, convincing the young girl to keep their relationship private, had come back to haunt him. He had tried to use their 7 years of history to soften her heart, only to find she was cruel enough to deny those 7 years entirely, leaving him in an impossible position. He opened and closed his mouth, overwhelming regret spreading through every fiber of his being. All he could do was shake his head repeatedly, unable to form words. Amelia turned to look at Timothy, who immediately understood her intention. With a wave of his hand, security promptly and forcefully removed Jackson so quickly that it left onlookers impressed. The venue returned to calm, and the couple faced the officiant again, nodding for him to continue. The officiant repeated the question that had been interrupted, and without further disturbance, Amelia answered clearly, "I do." The wedding proceeded smoothly from there, with no one mentioning the earlier disruption, treating it as merely an anecdote. "I'm sorry, Amy. It was my fault for bringing my brother in. I had no idea he would pull such a stunt." After everything concluded, Veronica hurriedly caught up with Amelia as she was about to leave. Her gestures and expression showed awkwardness and restraint, which Amelia pretended not to notice, inviting Veronica to join her in the same car. "It's not your fault. Knowing your brother's personality, even if you hadn't brought him in, he would have found another way." She had always distinguished clearly between Veronica and Jackson. Her complicated relationship with Jackson never affected her friendship with Veronica. Seeing that Amelia genuinely didn't mind, Veronica finally relaxed and sat down beside her. After hesitating for a long time, she asked, "Amy, what exactly happened between you and my brother? Was he the boyfriend you mentioned to me before?" She shook her head, about to say nothing, when Veronica interrupted. "Don't try to fool me. My brother doesn't lack secretaries. He wouldn't travel all this way to disrupt a wedding for just any secretary." Amelia paused, looking at Veronica's determined expression. Finally, she sighed and decided not to conceal the truth any longer. "Yes, I dated him for 7 years. 7 years, Veronica's voice suddenly rose. She had known Amelia had a boyfriend who dated her for a long time but refused to meet people, but she didn't know the exact duration. Now suddenly learning the truth, she counted on her fingers, her eyes widening. I've only known you for 7 years. You started dating as soon as you met. How did you get together? Did he confess first? Why didn't you tell me? Amelia was startled by her suddenly elevated voice and patted her shoulder helplessly. Don't get so worked up. And you're asking so many questions, where should I start? But Veronica wouldn't let Amelia off so easily. She put her hands on her hips and glared at her. Start from the beginning. After hearing their story, Veronica nearly fainted from anger. She wasn't entirely oblivious to their situation. After all, she had witnessed Jackson's admiration for Miranda and knew about Amelia's resemblance to her. So when they first met, and Jackson started subtly asking about Amelia, she had sternly warned him not to harbor ulterior motives toward her friend. She considered Amelia her best friend and certainly wouldn't stand by watching her jump into a fire. But they had maintained a friendly facade in her presence. And even if there was some special treatment, she attributed it to the benefits Amelia gained due to her resemblance to Miranda. She had turned a blind eye, never suspecting anything. She never imagined that this oversight would waste 7 years of Amelia's youth. I'm so sorry, Amy. It's all my fault for not warning you sooner. If I had known your boyfriend who refused to go public was Jackson, I would have realized his bad intentions. Damn that Jackson Wells to think I should never have trusted him with you. By the end, Veronica's voice had taken on a teeth-grinding quality. Amelia pulled her into an embrace, soothingly patting her back. It's not your fault. I was the one who misjudged character and was deceived by his appearance. I kept you in the dark by believing his words. This has nothing to do with you. Besides, look at me now, I'm fine, aren't I? Timothy treats me very well. I'm happy now. Actually, if it weren't for Jackson Wells, I might not have obediently accepted Dad's arranged marriage, and I wouldn't have met Timothy. Isn't this a blessing in disguise? Come on, today is my wedding day. All this crying doesn't suit the occasion. Dry your tears. Amelia took a tissue from her purse and gently wiped away Veronica's tears. Taking advantage of the moment, Veronica rested her head on Amelia's shoulder, her voice muffled. Amy, you won't stop being friends with me because of him, will you? Of course not. You'll always be my best friend. She couldn't help but smile, her voice gentle as she comforted Veronica, until a sudden tap-tap on the window interrupted them. Lowering the window, she saw Timothy looking somewhat displeased outside. His gaze kept darting to the tearful Veronica in Amelia's arms, his jaw clenched as he forced a smile. We need to head back. Is this young lady planning to? I'll go back on my own. Sensing Timothy's desire to see her leave, Veronica didn't linger. She hastily wiped her tears with the back of her hand and got out of the car. After closing the door, she turned to Amelia through the still lowered window. Amy, be happy. Don't forgive him. She didn't specify who him was, but they both knew. Amelia nodded and waved goodbye. Veronica, take care. Veronica watched as Timothy got into the car and it drove away, eventually disappearing from sight. She would return to Y City tomorrow. Who knew when they would meet again? She turned and got into another car where Jackson had been waiting. Seeing Veronica enter, his eyes flickered, but before he could speak, she cut him off. Don't ask me anything about Amy. I won't tell you. She sat in the passenger seat, not even glancing at him as she preemptively rejected his request. Her voice carried a hint of irritation. Brother, why did it have to be Amy? I warned you back then. Amy is my best friend. If you needed a substitute, why did you have to choose her? How am I supposed to face her now? Why? Jackson laughed bitterly. Because at that time, his heart and mind were filled with Miranda, who had left him to go abroad. The moment he saw Amelia, his entire being had trembled. She was so similar. So similar that despite Veronica's repeated warnings not to harbor ill intentions toward Amelia, he had recklessly and shamefully pursued her anyway. He couldn't even pinpoint when he had truly fallen for her. He only realized it when she was heartbroken and chose to leave him. He covered his face, suppressing his emotions as he wept quietly. Veronica in the front seat couldn't be bothered with him, instructing the driver to leave. Soon they arrived at the hotel, and without waiting for him, she went upstairs. Early the next morning, she coldly knocked on his door. Seeing him open it with a disheveled appearance, she wrinkled her nose in disgust. Hurry up and pack. I've booked a 9 a.m. flight back to Y City. You're coming with me." She wasn't about to risk letting Jackson stay alone in Amelia's city. If they were leaving, they had to leave together. The wedding day incident might already be spreading, and she needed to prepare. She couldn't let Amelia suffer any more harm because of them. Meanwhile, when Amelia woke up, she found that her father had already arranged for all her belongings to be packed and sent over. They now sat in the living room, with the staff efficiently organizing everything. Her colorful dresses hung neatly in his closet alongside his exclusively black, white, and gray suits, adding vibrancy to the otherwise somber collection. The dressing table, which had seemed somewhat empty yesterday with only a few spare makeup and skincare items, was now completely filled. She approached curiously, finding everything was from brands she regularly used, all brand new and unopened. "How did you know I use these?" She casually picked up a bottle of moisturizer, waving it at him with curiosity. He smiled, making no attempt to hide his methods. "I have many ways to find out what I want to know." He gently pulled her into his arms, placing a kiss on the corner of her lips, his gaze meeting hers through the mirror as he observed her slightly flushed cheeks. She pushed at him somewhat reproachfully, but he didn't budge. Eventually, she gave up, inadvertently revealing the kiss mark on her neck. Feeling self-conscious under his possessive gaze, she tugged at her collar to cover it before curiously asking, "Did you discover a lot?" Timothy shook his head. "Just some trivial matters. Regarding my wife's private affairs, if she's willing to share with me, I'd rather hear it directly from her." Like that Jackson Wells who disrupted their wedding yesterday. But clearly, the current Amelia had no desire to discuss this matter, so he didn't ask. Instead, she seemed more interested in something else. She looked up at him, and Timothy's face filled her vision, so close she felt she could count each of his eyelashes. Amelia's cheeks flushed slightly. Despite their more intimate contact the previous night, she still couldn't calmly accept such proximity. Fortunately, he didn't maintain this posture for long, soon stepping back and giving her a chance to breathe. She inwardly marveled at how perceptive this man was, always withdrawing at just the right moment to avoid making her uncomfortable. "Do you like me?" After much hesitation, Amelia finally asked the question. From their first meeting, his attitude had given her this impression, but she always felt it was a misperception, especially since she was certain they had never met before. He nodded without hesitation, and seeing the confusion in her eyes, he couldn't help but feel a trace of disappointment. "You might not remember me, but I remember you vividly. 10 years ago, I was leading a team in a national competition when jealous rivals locked me in a storage room. You saved me." She still looked blank. After his initial disappointment, he regained his composure. "To you, it was probably just an insignificant event not worth remembering, but for someone with claustrophobia like I was then, your arrival was like a godsend." His description made her blush furiously, and she hurriedly waved her hands, calling it an exaggeration. But he shook his head, pulling her back into his embrace. "Don't rush to deny it, Amy. Without you, there would be no me today." Amelia next heard news of Jackson through media reports, accompanied by photos of him unconscious on a stretcher. Normally, a businessman visiting a hospital wouldn't make headlines, but having recently been embroiled in 2 romantic scandals, this news of his alcohol-induced hospitalization stirred public curiosity. People speculated he was suffering from heartbreak, though it wasn't clear which relationship had caused it. After all, he had abandoned his self-proclaimed fiancé at their wedding, yet tried to disrupt the wedding of someone who had never been publicly linked to him before. The more people had gossiped about the Wells-Coleman engagement, the more laughable that match now seemed. As people dug deeper, they uncovered some interesting tidbits, like how the woman whose wedding he tried to disrupt had studied finance in college, but went straight to work at Wells Group after graduation, becoming Jackson's secretary, or how some had seen them leaving work together in the same car, driven by Jackson himself, or how this secretary had been quite close to Jackson during her college years, deflecting questions by referring to him as "my best friend's brother." And perhaps most tellingly, how Jackson's abandoned fiancé bore a 70% resemblance to his secretary, and the 2 women had once clashed publicly. The more they uncovered, the more shocking the story became. Reviewing Jackson's words at the wedding disruption and connecting the dots, It seemed Jackson and Amelia had been in a secret relationship all along. But when the Coleman heiress returned from abroad, he immediately arranged an engagement with her. Had they broken up then? No one knew for sure, since they had never publicly acknowledged their relationship in the first place. A tale of a substitute and her authentic counterpart, where the substitute eventually lost interest despite winning the man's heart, played out in netizens' minds. Through this unintentional investigation, they had guessed about 70 to 80% of the truth. Some called Jackson a playboy, others called him scum. Of course, some criticism was directed at Amelia too, suggesting that Jackson abandoned her because she wasn't good enough, or calling her lacking in self-respect for staying with a man who wouldn't acknowledge her publicly for 7 years, then being unable to let go even after he cheated on her. During this time, Amelia received a call from Mr. and Mrs. Wells. No matter how badly their son had behaved, they couldn't completely abandon him. Although most of the company power had transferred to Veronica, essentially half disowning their son, seeing him wasting away with alcohol day after day, until he was hospitalized. Hearing him constantly mumbling Amelia's name, they felt compelled to swallow their pride and ask for her help. The distance between North City and Y City spanned half the country. Even by plane, the journey was exhausting due to the long travel time. This was precisely why Amelia had initially only told Veronica about returning home for marriage without actively inviting her to the wedding. Now her only connection to the Wells family was through her friendship with Veronica. Her final encounter with Jackson had been unpleasant, and the online criticism stemming from Jackson's actions remained unaddressed. Visiting him now as a married woman would only invite more criticism. With these thoughts, she refused firmly. Just as she finished speaking, Timothy's voice called out, "Amy, dinner's ready." Amelia responded affirmatively, maintaining her final dignity as she bid farewell to Mr. and Mrs. Wells before hanging up. Going downstairs, she was delighted to see the delicious-looking lunch on the table. Since their marriage, he had made time to return home for lunch with her every day. Today, he had even promised to cook himself to showcase his culinary skills. Amelia had assumed that someone of Timothy's status would be doing well if the food was merely edible, but after tasting it, she realized she had underestimated him. She gave him an enthusiastic thumbs up. Timothy laughed softly, pinching her nose with a somewhat exasperated smile. "You underestimate me. I survived 7 years alone in a country notorious for its culinary wasteland." His tone carried a hint of pride, and she played along supportively. "You're amazing." His boasting only earned him these 5 words of encouragement, causing Timothy's proud expression to crumble instantly. He pinched her cheek, his voice taking on a somewhat teeth-gritting quality. "You're just humoring me," she giggled, rescuing her face from his grasp and casually picking up a morsel of food to place in his mouth. "You did well, this is your reward." Through their daily interactions, Amelia had grown accustomed to life with Timothy. The serious and cold Timothy that others saw was like a lively, playful friend in her presence. After returning to North City, when her father asked about her plans, she decided against continuing her previous career. Instead, she began learning how to manage the corporation's affairs, preparing for her eventual inheritance of the family business. Whenever she encountered difficulties, Timothy was there to guide her, helping her progress rapidly. This was Amelia's first official day at Somerset Corporation. With so many tasks to handle, she lost track of lunchtime. It wasn't until Timothy arrived with lunch boxes that she finally realized, letting out a disappointed ah before quickly putting down her documents to join him. "What's for lunch today?" Her eyes were full of anticipation as she watched him methodically open the lunch boxes and arrange the dishes. Creamy fish soup and tender fish meat normally her favorites. But today, for some reason, when the fragrant aroma reached her nostrils, her stomach suddenly churned. She tried to suppress the feeling, but the more she tried, the stronger the nausea became. When Timothy held out a small bowl of fish soup, gently blowing on it before offering it to her, the fish smell intensified, and she could no longer hold back. She abruptly stood up and rushed to the executive washroom, violently retching. This sudden change startled him, and he hurried after her, concerned. "What's wrong, darling? Is there something wrong with the fish soup? I followed the same recipe as before, and you were fine then. What happened today?" Amelia shook her head, still unclear herself. In between bouts of retching, she managed to reassure Timothy, "I don't know either. It just suddenly smelled very fishy and made me feel sick." After emptying her stomach, her face had turned somewhat pale, her thoughts jumbled. Although it was her stomach that felt unwell, she instinctively touched her abdomen, suddenly realizing something as she looked up at Timothy. He was confused by her look, asking what was wrong, only to see a blush spread across her face as she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Timothy, you might be about to become a father." Timothy blinked a few times, taking a moment to process her meaning before his eyes lit up with joy. Without hesitation, he scooped Amelia into his arms, his face beaming with undisguised happiness. The sudden loss of balance made her cry out softly, but then he carried her straight out of the office building. Hearing the employee's momentary silence followed by continuous cheering, she was so embarrassed that she buried her face in his chest, trying to block out the noise. Timothy ignored the crowd, putting Amelia into the car before fastening her seatbelt. He then got in from the other side and instructed the driver to head to the hospital. The car sped along, quickly arriving at First Central Hospital's obstetrics department. After an urgent examination, they soon received confirmation of a 5-week pregnancy. In his excitement, Timothy forgot they were still in the hospital and leaned in to kiss her lips. Fortunately, such scenes weren't uncommon in the obstetrics department. Most people glanced over with a smile before moving on without much attention until "Amy?" In the midst of the kiss that was making her dizzy, a familiar exclamation snapped Amelia back to reality. She quickly pushed him away, fumbling backward a few steps. Interrupted, Timothy looked behind him with obvious irritation, his mood souring further when he saw who had spoken. Veronica immediately abandoned the sickly Jackson and rushed toward Amelia, about to throw herself at her friend. Just before reaching her, Timothy suddenly stepped in front, blocking her path. The abrupt halt nearly made Veronica fall backward. She was about to complain when she saw him carefully guiding Amelia to a nearby chair. Noticing his extraordinary caution, Veronica glanced at the sign above them and suddenly realized, "Amy, are you pregnant?" Seeing her shy nod, Veronica magnanimously took out a red envelope from her purse and pressed it into her hands. "Here, this is for my future godson or goddaughter." Amelia unconsciously felt the thickness of the envelope, her expression showing both surprise at its weight and astonishment that Veronica happened to have one ready. Clearly seeing her surprise, Veronica chuckled. "Mom made me accompany my brother to North City for his recovery. I figured since I was coming anyway, I might as well bring a red envelope. You never know when it might come in handy. And look, it's already useful." She unceremoniously pushed Timothy away from Amelia's side and leaned in to whisper in her ear. "Let me tell you, after our last meeting, I took over the family business. I can't stay long this time, but I wanted to see you anyway. My brother's health collapsed after his hospitalization, and since he needed recovery time regardless of location, my mother took pity on him when she heard him constantly saying your name and sent him here. If you don't want to see him, just ignore him, pretend he doesn't exist." As Veronica spoke, Amelia's gaze gradually drifted toward the stairwell, where a frail Jackson in hospital clothes was being supported by someone. He looked nothing like his formerly confident self. Before seeing her, he had been constantly murmuring her name, but now that he actually saw her, he hastily averted his gaze when he noticed her looking his way. He had also seen the directional sign and felt nothing but bitter sourness in his heart. So she already had a child with someone else. Amelia had no intention of reconnecting with him and was about to look away when Timothy, who had been pushed aside, stepped forward to block her line of sight. Tilting her chin up to face him, he cleared his throat and looked around awkwardly, his entire demeanor screaming discomfort. Amelia and Veronica were close, and he couldn't interfere. But when it came to the defeated Jackson Wells, he had no qualms about intervening. Meanwhile, Veronica pulled out another card and resumed her whispered conversation. "Also, I found out about how Miranda bullied you and how Jackson took her side, forcing you to apologize. So after I took control, my first act was to get justice for you by ensuring those responsible received their due punishment. Through legal means, she's been sentenced to 2 years without parole." Hearing Miranda's name, Amelia froze momentarily, not even reacting when the card was placed in her hand. She looked up at Veronica in confusion, who simply tucked the card into Amelia's pocket. This is her compensation payment. There's nothing wrong with accepting it. She had malicious intentions. This is what she deserves. Only then did Amelia realize who Veronica was referring to. She smiled and accepted the card without protest. Veronica was right. Miranda had done wrong and received appropriate consequences. The compensation rightfully belonged to her, so there was no reason to refuse. She could only reflect on how, though just a few months had passed, when she recalled that period, it seemed like a lifetime ago. Amelia took the initiative to hold Timothy's hand, pulling him to sit beside her. The previous Amelia had been unlucky, wasting 7 years of her youth with Jackson Wells only to exit the stage quietly. But the current Amelia was fortunate. She had a father who always thought of her, friends who stood firmly by her side, a husband who loved her, and now, a child they were bringing into the world. Amelia chatted with Veronica a while longer until drowsiness overtook her, and Timothy insisted on carrying her home. News of the pregnancy quickly reached the ears of all the elders in both the Somerset and Sinclair families. Perhaps because this was the first great-grandchild for both families, the news created quite a stir. Suddenly, Amelia became like a fragile porcelain doll, receiving protection from everyone in both families. Finding herself the center of attention, Amelia felt quite uncomfortable, worried that with one word, even 80-year-old Lady Beatrice Sinclair would move into their marital home to provide constant care. It was Timothy who finally sent all the elders back to the family mansion, greatly reducing Amelia's stress. 8 months later, outside the operating room, Alexander Somerset and the Sinclair parents anxiously waited while Timothy, dressed in surgical scrubs, had gone inside with Amelia. Not far from them, Jackson secretly hid around the corner, equally filled with worry. He had heard that childbirth for women was like walking through death's door. Though medical conditions had improved considerably, some trauma was still unavoidable. He wondered how Amelia was doing. He had stayed at First Central Hospital for over 8 months. Beyond knowing her condition was normal, he knew nothing else. His anxiety matched or exceeded that of the informed parents. Until a loud infant's cry suddenly rang out from the operating room, everyone outside finally relaxed. But with no one emerging, their anxiety began to rise again. Finally, after another 15 minutes, the red light went out and the operating room doors opened. The doctor removed his mask, a broad smile on his face. "Congratulations, mother and daughter are both safe. It's a healthy baby girl, 7 pounds and 8 ounces. Not long after, both mother and child were safely transferred to a private room. When the 3 parents entered, Timothy was carefully wiping the sweat from Amelia's forehead. Seeing her wake up, they all gathered around. "Where's the baby?" Having just gone through labor, her voice was still weak, but with so many people around, someone quickly brought the baby to her when they heard her request. "A 7-pound 8-ounce baby girl. Look, she resembles you a lot." During the pregnancy, Timothy had taken classes on caring for pregnant women and infants. Although servants would handle most tasks, he believed that while he might not need these skills, he should know them in case they were needed. Now, holding the baby seemed completely natural to him. Looking at her plump, fair-skinned daughter, Amelia reached out and curiously poked her cheek. It was so soft that Amelia's heart melted completely. How amazing she had given birth to a little human. "Have you named the baby?" She tried to appear composed as she asked about her daughter's name, but to her surprise, everyone shook their heads in unison. Timothy's eyes were full of tenderness as he placed the baby next to her head before explaining. "You endured so much pain to bring her into the world, so your father-in-law, mother-in-law, father, and I all agreed that you should name her." She pondered briefly before 2 characters came to her lips. "Xiao. Let's call her Sophia Xiao." Outside the door, Jackson watched this harmonious family scene with an aching heart. He silently savored the name Xiao, eventually letting out a soft laugh. "The moon rises bright, the beautiful one is nearby. Graceful and lithe, my heart worries silently." It was a good name. He quietly turned the doorknob, slipping a prepared gift box through the door crack before gently closing it and walking away. The soft click of the door lock caught Amelia's attention. She urged Timothy to check if someone had come by. Reluctantly, he stood up, placing another kiss on her lips and enjoying her blush before going to the door. He immediately spotted the gift box on the floor. His eyes darkened, obviously guessing who it was from. But in the end, he didn't discard the box, instead bringing it to Amelia. Someone did come by, but they just left this box and left. When the box was opened, it revealed a jade pendant for protection. Her smile remained unchanged. Keep it. What was past, she had long since moved on.